Hey guys, how's it going? This week we're going to be talking about ecdysozoans. Wow, I didn't mean to rhyme. But ecdysozoans are organisms that shed their exoskeleton, right? The two primary phyla we're going to talk about are arthropods and nematodes. Um, and we'll get to those in a minute. In the meantime, I really wanted to show you guys. So, this is our page, right? This is our course page. When you go to practical exam study material, when you click on that and you click on animal practical material here, we have the characteristic table. I highly recommend downloading that, opening it up in Microsoft Word, and printing it out. As I'm going through these PowerPoints, you should take notes and list defining characteristics. Notice that we're already down here. So we're already starting with the nematodes and arthropods. You can always go back and take notes on the other ones, but this will really help you when you're taking the practical exam online. Coming up very soon, the week of November 16th. So you'll have all week to do that. Also, take a look at this course calculator. If you have Microsoft Excel installed, you can download this, change all the grades in red to match your grades, and figure out what your overall Bio 202 course grade is. Because this lab is roughly 25% of your overall grade. So you can combine your lecture and lab points. All right, so let's get started on this week's material. So just a little bit of review. What organism is this from last time? This is Platyhelminthes, right? Remember that they have flame cells, and go back and look at all of their traits, okay? They do not have a complete digestive system, remember, and they have eye spots as well, okay? What group do these three organisms belong to? So we have this gastropod in the middle, we have the Polypocophora here, and we have an oyster here. This is mollusca. So we have Placophora, Gastropoda, and Bivalvia. Those are the three classes in the phylum Mollusca that you need to know, okay? What group is this? We have these three organisms. These are annelids, Annelida. So we have Polychaeta, polychaetes, Oligochaeta, the earthworms, and Hirudiniae. So these are the leeches, right? So last week we talked about Lophotrochozoans and how that they are protostomes. So these two groups here are protostomes, meaning that the mouth forms before the anus. This week we're talking about ecdysozoans, the organisms that shed their exoskeleton, right? So the first phylum we'll talk about is Nematoda. These are our roundworms, our nematodes. Examples include heartworms and dogs or cats, right? And we have, or I think mainly just dogs, and then some traits about them. So non-living exoskeleton, which is made out of chitin, right? That protein. Also some calcium carbonate in there. These guys exhibit bilateral symmetry. They're triploblastic, meaning they have the endo, ecto, and mesoderm. They're pseudocoelomates. They do not have a true coelom or body cavity to keep all of their organs in. And they live in marine, freshwater, and terrestrial environments. They only have longitudinal muscles, no circular muscles. And they regularly exhibit ecdysis, which is molting their exoskeleton, right? They have these things called amphids. These are sensory organs, okay? They are open and closed here in this photo. And here's just a little bit of anatomy of a nematode. So roundworm reproduction. So these guys are sexual. They're dioecious. Remember what that means. We have males and females, right? Two separate individuals. We experience internal fertilization here. They also exhibit direct development, okay, as opposed to metamorphosis. So you should know that direct development means that the animal is just growing larger. There's no sort of metamorphosizing going on. These organisms can be free-living or parasitic. So in plants, they are sucking or piercing roots or other plant materials, can result in a lot of crop damage. In animals, they can cause lots of diseases of wide variety. We talked about heartworm. These organisms are free living. They are beneficial in decomposition of organic matter. Okay, so here are just some examples. So here's a plant disease, and then also elephantitis, right, down here. So this is from your lab manual. So these questions may be a little different than what your lab manual says, but you guys should be going with your lab manual questions. So how does movement differ from the planarians and the earthworms? How do these guys move? You can look up a video online. What are the primary paired sensory organs in nematodes? We said that those were amphids, right? Do nematodes have a true coelom? No, they're pseudocoelomates, right? So the next phylum we're going to talk about is Arthropoda, and this has a lot of different classes in it. So phylum Arthropoda is the largest animal phylum. There are over 1 million species. 90% of them are insects. These organisms are rigid, and they have a non-living exoskeleton, again made of chitin and calcium carbonate. They're named Arthropoda because they have jointed appendages. So arthro meaning jointed, poda meaning feet, so they have jointed feet. Regularly, they molt their exoskeleton, so they too exhibit ecdysis. They again have bilateral symmetry, all three tissue types, so endo, ecto, and mesoderm, meaning they're triploblastic, and they are eucoelomates, so they do have a true coelom, true body cavity to keep their organs in. You can watch a video here on molting. So anatomy and morphology of our arthropoda. We have what are called regional muscles. They're positioned in bands along the body segment in order for those appendages to move. We have an open circulatory system here. So the hemocoel, which is a blood chamber, and the heart along a dorsal blood vessel. Okay. We do have a closed excretory system, and in some of these arthropods, we have what are called Malpighian tubes and green glands. So it just depends on the class. So when we get to talking about different classes, make sure you make note of how they excrete waste. So reproduction is going to vary widely amongst organisms. So again, most of these are going to have separate sexes, meaning they're dioecious, and they will reproduce sexually. We do have an exception, barnacles, the Ceropedia, those are mostly hermaphroditic. So they have both male and female parts. Fertilization can be internal or external. Most terrestrial species have internal fertilization, and metamorphosis will occur from larval stages to adult stages. So here's an image up top of metamorphosis. So if we have a larva stage and it goes into an intermediate stage and then adult stage, that's going to be metamorphosis. When we have an organism that's small and it's just growing larger, for example, in humans, that is direct development, okay? And you do need to know the difference between those two. So here again is an image from your lab manual exercises. You should just look at the morphology of the crayfish, because we would typically do a dissection. You should watch the dissection videos. Be able to name these different structures on a crayfish. So if we were to give you a blank image of this, make sure you know where these things are. Okay, so we have antennae, eyes, mouth, anus, cephalothorax, abdomen, tail, swimmerets, all right, the little legs here, so walking legs, and the swimmerets in the back. And then we have chelipeds, those bigger claw-like structures, and a carapace, all right, the structure in the middle there. So based on what we were talking about before, the crayfish, here's just the internal anatomy, okay? So we have all of these structures that you need to know: gills, stomach, digestive gland. In our crayfish, we have green glands. We also have a brain up top and a ventral nerve cord that basically lines the entire body. So within Arthropoda, we have 4 subphyla and 7 classes. So you do need to know the names of all of these. We'll talk about the subphylum Chelicerata and classes Arachnida and Meristomata. We'll talk about Myriapodia and the two classes Diplopoda and Chilopoda. We'll talk about Hexapoda and the class Insecta. We'll talk about Crustacea and the two classes Malacostraca and Ceropedia. So the first subphylum, Chelicerata, these organisms have what are called chelicerae. These are appendages near the mouth that aid in feeding. Some of these chelicerae have venom, for example, in spiders, right? So these organisms have 4 pairs of legs, 8 in total. So the two classes that would be under the subphylum Chelicerata are Arachnida and Meristomata. So class Arachnida lists the tagmata of arachnids. So what do arachnids have? What are the tagmata? You can find that online. Arachnids have how many pairs of walking legs? How many pairs? So they have 8 legs in total, but 4 pairs, right? What are the function of chelicerae? Go back. They aid in feeding, right? Contain venom in some organisms. So this class Arachnida also, the cephalothorax has a pair of chelicerae, like we said. The abdomen is posterior to the cephalothorax. They excrete their waste using Malpighian tubules. Okay, you should know that. They have simple eyes that are not image forming, and almost all the species of arachnids live in terrestrial habitats. So under class Arachnida, we have scorpions, spiders, ticks, and mites. The next class under Chelicerata, the subphylum, is Meristomata. These are just horseshoe crabs. These are pretty cool organisms. They have what is called a spiked terminal segment. It's a telson. All right, that's their tail at the end. It's called a telson. Extremely ancient animals. They've been around for about 570 million years. Very important in marine pharmacology. So when I used to work in a microbiology lab at a pharmaceutical company, we actually used horseshoe crab blood to indicate the presence of endotoxin, which can make humans very sick. So if it was present in the drug, if endotoxin was present, somehow got cross-contaminated, then the horseshoe crab blood would coagulate. Very interesting. These organisms migrate to shallow or coastal water habitats on the eastern U.S. and Gulf of Mexico in order to breed. So questions about them, just know what their structure is. They have this telson, which is a tail, right? Notice their carapace, abdomen, chelicera, pedipalps, walking legs, mouth, book gills. Okay. So the next subphylum under the phylum Arthropoda, okay, is Myriapoda. So Myriapoda, these have many legs, okay, and we have 2 different classes under these. We have Diplopoda and Chilopoda. So the first class, Diplopoda, are the millipedes. So these organisms, the way you can differentiate them, each trunk segment is fused into pairs. So each segment has 2 pairs of legs. The cuticle has a waxy layer which allows them to roll into a ball or coil up, and these organisms feed on detritus or decomposing organic matter. So millipedes have blank number of legs per body segment. They have 2, right? Are these organisms in Diplopoda carnivores or detritivores? What do you think? They eat detritus or decomposing organic matter. The next class, Chilopoda, these organisms have numerous unfused segments. So they do not have fused segments except for the first and last 2. So up here and then the back, they have fused segments, but that's it. And they have a lot less legs than Diplopoda. So the first segment has a modified pair of appendages that contain venom, which are fangs, and these organisms are mostly carnivorous. So centipedes, the Chilopoda, are these carnivores or detritivores? Well, I just said these are carnivores, okay? So the next subphylum under the phylum Arthropoda is Hexapoda. These organisms have 3 pairs of legs, so 6 legs in total. So that's where we get the hex from, meaning 6. Most of these species, so this is comprised of most of the species within arthropods. So lots of organisms in here. We have one class that we're going to talk about. There is another class, but you're not responsible for knowing it. And there also are believed to be 900,000 species within this subphylum. So class Insecta, which we'll talk about, we're supposed to look at the grasshopper, but we aren't able to do that. So just watch a video online if you'd like. It's in the lab manual. So answer these questions. How is the grasshopper similar to the crayfish? What structures do you see on the grasshopper that are also on the crayfish? How does it differ? What's the purpose of spiracles? Okay, look those up. Read in the ebook online. List the life stages for complete metamorphosis. So these guys go through metamorphosis. So list all the different life stages that they experience. The next class, so the class under Hexapoda is called Insecta, as I promised. These consist of beetles, bees, flies, mosquitoes, ants, any insects, right? Their bodies are comprised of a head, thorax, and abdomen, and they have a pair of compound eyes, which are image forming. They have wings on the second and third thoracic segments as well. Subphylum Crustacea is the next phylum we'll talk about. So we have left Hexapoda. We are still under Arthropoda, the phylum, but the subphylum Crustacea. So these mouth parts are made of mandibles, which are modified appendages. These appendages are considered multi-articulate, and they have several joints. And they also have 2 branches, so biremus, all right? They do undergo metamorphosis, so they have a larval stage and then to an adult stage. They have gills for gas exchange, and most of these species are going to have a carapace that covers some of their dorsal segments of the head and thorax. So it's more of a protective shield. These are these consist of marine organisms, so living in shallow or deep ocean. They can even be in brackish or freshwater environments. So here we have blue crabs, and then we have some barnacles. So the first class under the subphylum Crustacea is Malacostraca. So Malacostraca consists of crabs, lobsters, shrimp, and pillbugs. This is the largest class of crustaceans. These crabs can range in size from a few millimeters to even 3.7 meters, including their legs. Lobsters can grow up to 1.5 meters in length and live quite a long time. So here's a little oyster crab, and then we have a giant lobster here. The next class, which is technically a subclass, but don't worry about that, is class Cirripedia. These are the barnacles. You'll see these a lot around Wilmington. Adult barnacles are the only sessile crustaceans. Everything else is free moving. So sessile, these guys rest on some sort of structure. As larvae, the barnacles are pelagic, and they have a shell composed of plates. They survive very well in harsh environments by withdrawing into their shell. And these organisms, as I mentioned before, are hermaphroditic. Everybody else is sexual, but these are hermaphroditic. Or everybody else is dioecious, right? So Cirripedia, during which life stage are the barnacles free living and not attached to substrate? So remember, as larvae, the organisms are free living, but as adults, they are sessile. Make sure on your phylogenetic tree from Lab 6, which is located on page 41, you add these 3 characteristics, okay? This is what your tree should look like thus far, all right? So we've gone through all of these phylum so far, these phyla. So make sure to add ecdysis, longitudinal muscles, and jointed appendages, okay? Check this and correct it if you need, correct your version. And as I mentioned last time, we have the lab practical number 2 during the week of November 16th. So in just 2 weeks, and your quiz. So this is actually, should say number 8 here, not number 9. So I'll have to fix that. It is due on November 8th, so next week. Number 9 won't be due until the 15th of November. All right, so as always, let me know if you need anything. I'm here for you guys. Come to office hours and ask questions, okay?